Hi everyone, this is a video about the exercises from 7 to 12 of Chapter 9, Application International Trade. This is a book of Gregory Mankiw called Principles of Economics. So the first question, the 7th one, says, Senator Ernest Holdings once wrote that consumers do not benefit from lower priced imports. Glance through some mail order catalogs and you'll see that consumers pay exactly the same price for clothing, whether it is US made or imported. Comment. So basically, if we represent this idea of the Senator Ernest Holling, we will have here the supply as usual upward slope and the demand downward slope. Here we have the price and the quantities as common, and we have the Q star and P star. This P star and Q star represent the equilibrium price without trade. Okay, so those are the domestic the domestic prices and the domestic quantities. So due to the open of trade, so when the trade now is free, given that the prices are exactly the same, we see how the world price is exactly the same as domestic price. So he said that the consumers, they don't benefit because, as you notice, this triangle is considered as the consumer surplus, and with the same price there is no any change of from the consumer side. So 8. Write a brief essay advocating or criticizing each of the following policy positions. A. The government should not allow imports if foreign firms are selling below their costs of production, a phenomenon called dumping. So here I analyze in a positive way. Obviously you can take like that you don't agree with this policy. So for example, as a positive, you will see how from one side the producer surplus will be reduced. How come? Because the producer surplus, given the lower price in the world trade, or like the world price went or goes down, so in this case the producers, they have to supply their goods as a lower price, so they will be affected. But on the other side, as you know, the consumer surplus will be increased. Given the lower price in the world, consumer will be benefit, will be better off. So in this case, you know how the total welfare will be higher when you sum up the loss of the producer side is lower than the benefit of the consumer side. The second one says the government should temporarily stop the import goods for which the domestic industry is new and struggling to survive. So you can think about two sides, pro and cons about this policy. So as a pro, maybe it could be an incentive in order to promote, in order to encourage that national industry can grow in some way. But on the other side, given the less competitive of these new national industry, consumers definitely they have to pay more instead of buying from abroad. So as a cons argument, you can think about the total welfare will be less, because when you sum up the loss of the consumers compared with the situation when there is free trade, the total welfare, consumer surplus plus producer surplus, will be less than a condition of free trade. And the last con argument could be the difficult position of canceling out this policy. As you know, when there is protection of one industry, once the government wants to cancel out this policy, it could be a lot of problems in order to this protect this industry, because in some way maybe the industry, they can, the association, they can allegate for they have to defend the national industry in some way, so it could be so hard to cancel out this this policy of stopping the import goods. The last one of these points, they say the government should not allow imports from countries with weaker environmental regulation than ours. So again, you have two sides. As a pro, which is like the side that I agree, it's both kind of environmental and responsibility. So obviously, in terms of economic welfare, it's not the best solution, but as a sustainable world, it could be the better option, the way of environmental responsibility. And another part could be like kind of protection of the national industry in some way. So in some way, domestic producers will better off. But as it comes, it could be because if they allow these imports, it's like an indirect way how the country is supporting footprints neighbor. So it's supporting pollution, it's supporting environmental problems. So it could be a good way to say that it's this is better. Actually, it has to be two. This was cones, right? So you can have here like a pro. So they are not supporting, okay, footprints neighbor. And the other part, the part which is really cons about that, the consumers will pay more, because definitely consumers will pay less given maybe a country that produce with weaker environmental regulation, but consumers will pay more, and they can be compensated the loss of the producer side. So the total welfare will be more apparently with the with allowing the imports of from the other country with weaker environmental regulation. So 9. Suppose that a technological advance in Japan lowers the world price of televisions. So as you remember from previous chapters, this is a shift to the supply curve in the world trade. Imagine that this Japan is a big country. So what does it mean? Basically, the big country can have the possibility to change the world prices. So in this sense, you will see how the supply curve will be shifted to the right, and the price will be lower. Okay, so the case is that assume that US is an importer of televisions and there are no trade restrictions. How does the technological advance affect the welfare of US consumers and US producers? What happens to total surplus in the United States? So here is the case. Again, we have supply and demand, and as usual, we have price in y-axis, and we have x in a quantity in x-axis. So we have here the P star and Q star. Remember, those represent the prices and quantities in the autarky when there is no trade. So this is the normal price, the PT. The PT, sorry, this is the change. So the PT prime actually is the first price. So when remember that US an import, so it means that the world price is lower than the domestic price. So producers, they will supply, instead of Q star, they will supply QC, because they don't have the same incentives to produce, because before they can offer, or they could offer, the products at the price of P star. So due to the trade, they have now to produce a QC. And from the other side, we have the consumers. You will see here how they have to pay PT prime instead of P star. So they have kind of benefit, and you can see that afterwards, and the consumer and producer surplus. So this QD, which is like the difference that the supply, domestic supply, cannot attend the demand. So this difference from QD to QC, they are the imports before the technological advance. Now, given the technological advance, the PT, which is the world price, it will be low even more. It will be low even more. So it will be lower, right? So you have here the PT instead of PT prime. So here at this PT, which is the last price after technological advance, you see here how even the domestic production each is even less given the lower price, so they have even less incentives to produce, so they have QB. And consumers, they have they have the benefit of consuming higher quantities because a lower price, so they will demand QA. So you notice here how the imports will be higher than before the technological advance. How we are going to analyze, we're going to outline this information in this table. So we have here the consumer surplus, producer surplus, and the total surplus. So we have the before the price down and after the price down. So basically before the technological advance and after the technological advance. So here, okay, so here we have the consumer surplus before technological advance. Remember, it was a price. So consumers, they have this consumer surplus. So remember the definition of consumer surplus. All these like long through the curve, this part, that was like the consumers, they are willing to pay even to these prices for the quantities. But they don't have to pay this part because of the trade. They have to pay PT prime. So all of these people from this curve, this is kind of saving. So they have to pay, instead of this price, they have to pay PT prime. So this kind of saving. So this old triangle is known as the consumer surplus. On the other side, we have the producer surplus. So they had before this triangle, okay, but given the lower price, they are affected, so they don't have this triangle anymore. They have to produce to this point, and they will have this triangle, C plus D. So the total surplus is going to be, okay, it doesn't appear here, but it's going to be this part plus this triangle. It's gonna be after. So here we have this after price down, after technological advance occurs. So you have the consumers, they are even better because remember they had before this triangle, but after the PT, the change, they will have all these big triangle. So they earn C, E, and F. So as you notice, C is like kind of transferred from producers to consumers, and EF is created given the technological advance. So you have here producers, they are even worse. So remember, every time the price go down, producers usually they get worse, and consumers they get better off. So you have here now G instead of CD, and instead of the free trade condition BCD, what's the very beginning. Okay, so this one is the D. So now you will see here. Okay, so the total surplus first, as said before, it's going to be this one plus this. After the technological advance, it's going to be all these big triangle plus Z. And the change, consumers, they will earn C plus E plus F after technological advance. The domestic producers, they will lose C, so it's going to be a loss. But as a total, the trade create this EF benefit, which is going to be taken by consumers. Okay, so now imagine that the United States has a quota of television imports. Okay, so what is the quota on television imports? Basically, the government fixes the quantity of television that can be imported. So, for instance, is before it was possible to import like 100 TVs without any problems. Now the government limits this quantity. The government says, okay, so you cannot import 100 TVs anymore. So you can just import 50 televisions. Okay, so this is interesting because they are going to be imported as the world price. Okay, so this is going to be the same supply curve as before, but after this limit passes, so suppliers, they're going to be the same as domestic ones. So the next televisions, they have to be supplied by the domestic markets, and those guys that can import as a world price, they are called as license holders. And how these licenses are distributed in these exercises, we assume that they are kind of random. So government provide them to the license holders, and there is no price for this. Okay, so here is our analysis. So I'm going to put everything because it's in this order, so we cannot like simulate. Okay, this is the part that I want. Remember, it was the demand, okay, it was the supply, okay, so we have here the demand, we have here the supply. So this one, the P star, it was the no free trade condition, P star and Q star. So now remember that there is there is here, okay, I need here anything, something else. Okay, so here we have the P star with the no free trade authority. Now remember, PD is like the normal price when there is free trade, so there is QD and QC, but there is a quota. Okay, so quota means that there is just this limit of imports. So in this case, suppliers, in this case the license holders, they can import this quantity. Automatically, when this limit is reached, the supply curve is going to be this one, the same slope as before. So this is going to be the new supply curve. Okay, so just for understand this stuff better, so we have here the QC. Okay, this is going to be the quantity demand for the consumers, but at the same time this is going to be the supply given by the domestic supply, so they can supply as a price of PD. Okay, so we can analyze here before the advance. Remember, this is before the advance. Okay, here, so what we have the consumer surplus. It was A plus B, okay, because they have to pay this PD, and the producer surplus is going to be this one, because remember, they can just produce to this one, and this like part is going to be attended by license holders. So producers surplus is going to be C plus G prime plus G2 prime. And what is the license holder surplus? So remember, they bring from the market to PT, and they sell this one to PD. Okay, so this one E prime and E2 prime is going to be considered as the license holder surplus. So the total surplus is going to be this one. So now after technological advance, you see here how the PT prime appears. So this is going to be the new price of the market. So now the quota will work as this. Okay, so after, when automatically, if the supply original curve reaches the PT prime, this is going to be the quantity, okay, imported by the license holders, and this one is going to start the supply curve again. So as you notice here, the change of the consumer surplus is going to be the same. It's going to be A plus B. And the other side, producer surplus, is going to be exactly the same. C plus G prime plus G2 prime. So where is the change? The change is basically here in the license holders, because they, instead of paying PT, they have to pay PT prime. Okay, so they have benefit of that. So all this triangle, which is E prime, E2 prime, E prime, and E2 prime, this is going to be the new license holder surplus. So this is going to be increased by E prime and EI2 prime. So as a change, you will see how this is going to be increased. But this is interested to take into account that when there is a tax, there is a deadweight loss. I didn't represent here, but you have here how this triangle is considered the deadweight loss, this one as well. Okay, and when there is the change of the price and the existence of license holders in quota, you see here how this part is going to be deadweight loss because no one takes it, and this one as well. Okay, so 10. When the government of trade land decides to impose an import quota of foreign cars, three proposals are suggested. First, sell the import licenses in an auction. Second, distribute the licenses randomly in a lottery. Third, let people wait in a line and distribute the licenses on a first-come, first-served basis. Compare the effects of these policies. Which policy do you think has the largest deadweight losses? Which policy has the smallest deadweight losses? Why? So as a hint, the government's other ways of raising tax revenue all cause deadweight losses themselves. So here I try to analyze the first situation where they sell the imports license in an auction. So here is the normal price. Okay, here is the PSR, which was the autarky, the no trade equilibrium. So here, remember, this is the world price, so it represents that this is an import country. So they will demand QA, but the domestic supply just attained this quantity QB, so all this is considered as import. This is the imports without quota. Once there is a quota, you will see here how it will change. Okay, so I'm going to represent here the new supply curve, which is in red one. So this is the limit of the quota, and they just going to be imported this quantity. Okay, so what's the point here? So this was the imports with quota. So the auction, the first situation, the auction, it's important to take into account that the difference PSR minus PT, this is going to be the maximum price that can be paid by license holders, because remember the license holders, they win the benefits. Okay, the difference between the world price, the price and the price that they take from the market. So this is going to be the change. Once the price the auction price is higher than P star, the license holder, they don't have incentives to pay this right in order to import. So in this sense, the auction cannot be higher than P star, okay, because once it's higher, there are no incentives to import, okay. So the second one, distribute the licenses randomly in a lottery. So before that, it's important to take into account that any time that the auction is bigger, it means that there is less intervention with the quota policy. So in this sense, the deadweight loss is going to be lower. Okay, so the second point is about distribute the licenses randomly in a lottery. So is as we have analyzed before. So there is no price used randomly. You provide the right to import. So in this sense, the deadweight loss is going to be DNF. Okay, and the third, let people wait in a line, distribute the licenses on a first come first served basis. It's going to be the same. It's going to be DNF, the deadweight loss, but we have to take into account the position of the cost, opportunity cost. So the time that you are wasting waiting in a line is going to be represented as a cost, because you can maybe produce whatever, do something instead of waiting in a line. So it's going to be like between quotation mark higher deadweight loss. So in this sense, you can say that the second one can produce the less deadweight loss. The first policy, it would be the lower one, since the auction price plus the PT is closer to PD. Okay, so in this sense, this is going to be, actually I'm thinking about it, not P star, maybe could be better PD. So when this one PD minus PT is equal to the auction price, we are going to stay in the same position as the free trade condition. Okay, and the worst one is going to be the third one, because of the deadweight loss. It's going to be DNF plus the cost of waiting in the line. So 11. An article in the Wall Street Journal about sugar beet growers explained that the government props up domestic sugar prices by curtailing imports of lower cost sugar. Producers are guaranteed a maker stabilization price to 0.22 cents a pound, about 0.09 higher than the current world price. The government maintains the higher price by imposing an import quota. So A illustrates the effect of this quota on the U.S. sugar market, labeled the relevant prices and quantities under free trade and under the quota. So here we have again supply and demand. So this one is this one P equal to 0.13, because plus 9 is going to be 0.22. Okay, so this one is going to be the quota. So you have here the PD now is going to be 0.22. So you can represent here the quota as this one. Okay, so you figure out here, this was the P star, was the price with no trade. Then the normal price could be the PT, which is 0.13, okay, which was this one. But given the policy of the government, it increases 9. Okay, so it's going to be P032. So this quantity is going to be like brought by the license holders. So this is going to be the new situation. QC is going to be the demand of the consumers, and QD is going to be the supply of the domestic producers, and those difference is going to be the imports with the quota. Okay, so this one is going to be the imports with quota. Okay, so the B says analyze the effects of the sugar quota using the tools of welfare analysis. So here we have again the price, the quantities. So here we're going to represent the quota. Okay, so here first the consumer surplus before the quota. So before the quota it was all this part. It was E plus B, C, D, E prime, E2 prime, F. Okay, it was all triangle. It was considered the consumer surplus before the quota because they had to pay PT. On the other side, they have the producer surplus. They have to offer the products at price of PT, so they just supply QB, and this G triangle is going to be the producer surplus, and the license holder surplus is going to be zero natural because they weren't present before the quota. So the total surplus was this whole triangle plus G. Now with the quota, consumers they have to pay instead of PT, they have to pay B, PD. So this is going to be A plus B. This is going to be the new consumer surplus. The producer surplus they can offer instead of PT, they can offer the products at price of PD. So they are going to offer QD. So this C plus G is going to be the new producer surplus. So they have kind of benefits of DC, which is transferred from consumer side to producers. What about license holder surplus? So remember, they go to the foreign market and they bring the products at the price of PT and they sell them at the price of PD. So this difference, which is going to be measured by the quantity imported, okay, times the price, the difference price that they earn, this is considered this rectangle E prime plus E2 prime. This is considered the license holder surplus. So after the quota, again you will have these two triangles less D and F, because as you notice this is taken by nobody. Okay, so here the change. So consumers they are really affected because of that. So they lost all this part. Okay, C transferred to the producers, V considered as a dead weight loss, as F the same, and this E prime and E2 prime is going to be transferred to license holder surplus. So here we have producer surplus, they are better by C, and the license holder surplus is going to be E prime plus E2 prime. So as a conclusion, you see here how the total surplus would be less by D and F, which is the consequence of a quota, the dead weight loss. So as a total, they are worse off. So see, the article also comments that critics of the sugar program say that the quota has deprived numerous sugar-producing nations in the Caribbean, Latin America, and Far East of export earnings, harmed the economies, and caused political instability while increasing third world demand for U.S. foreign aid. Our usual welfare analysis includes all the gains and losses to U.S. consumers and producers. What role do you think the gains or losses to people in other countries should play in our economy policy making? So here is like analysis. So this is like the world market. So given the new price, okay, which is higher. So this is the other side of the coin. Okay, so you have here the PT. Okay, this is the PT. This was the position that we have before. So here the analysis is important thing that so US is a is a big country. So given the quota, they affect the prices. Okay, don't pay attention to this because maybe it's not clear. So this one was the normal price before. So they have these exports, okay? But after the price increases given the demand of US that they have a higher price, so the new price is going to be PT. So remember, this is going to be the exports of the country to this price because it's higher, but they cannot export this part. Why? Because the demand imports of the US is less given the higher price. So there are two effects here. Consumers in the Caribbean, Latin America, and Far East, they are harmed because they have to pay more. Okay, and on the other side, producers, they can even supply more, but they cannot export earnings. Okay, they cannot export these because of the limit quantity of the US. So next point says the article continues that at home the sugar program has helped make possible the spectacular rise of the high fructose corn syrup industry. Why has the sugar program had this effect? So hint, are sugar and corn syrup substitutes? Substitutes or complement? So this one is the case. So we have here the corn. We have the corn syrup industry. We have the supply and demand curve. So you have this one, the Q star and P star. This is the core market. So given that the sugar price is higher, remember when there is higher a substitute good, in this case the demand, people start to look for a substitute because maybe it's kind of expensive, so they change to D prime. Okay, so this when the shift to the right, the demand curve. As a consequence, you will see how the producers, they are better off because they will receive higher price and a quantities higher to the market. So 12. Consider a small country that exports steel. Suppose that a pro-trade government decides to subsidize the export of steel by paying certain amount for each ton sold abroad. How does the export subsidy affect the domestic price of steel, the quantity of steel produced, the quantity of steel consumed, and the quantity of steel exported? How does it affect consumer surplus, producer surplus, and total surplus? Hint, the analysis of an export subsidy is similar to analysis of tariff. Okay, here we have the first case, the P star, Q star, okay. Here is the PT. This is the world price, okay. So this is the world price. So as you figure out here, this is an export country, okay. So this QI is going to be the quantity demanded by domestically at this price, and this is going to be the quantity supplied by this price. So this difference QB minus QA is considered as the export. Okay, so here we have the PT prime, okay, which is basically the subsidy. Okay, so this is the subsidy of the country. So they can't, the consumers, they won't receive any more PT. So this is the world price. It doesn't change because it's a small country. Just that the producers, they will receive, instead of PT, they will receive PT plus a subsidy, which is going to be PT prime. Okay, so this is going to be the case. So now, before the subsidy, the consumer surplus is going to be A plus B plus H, and producer surplus is going to be E plus F plus G plus D. This is going to be all the producer surplus, this part. Okay, so the government expense is going to be 0 because they don't have to pay anything for that. So the total surplus is going to be this triangle plus this. Now after subsidy, consumers they have to pay actually it's interesting here because I put age, but the world price doesn't change, so consumers they have to pay the same. They have to pay the same part. They have to pay H plus A plus B. This is going to be the price that they have to pay. So this is going to be the after subsidy. And producer surplus, this is going to be different because given that they can produce to this point, so they will have as a producer surplus is going to be C F A B E G D. Okay, so this is going to be all the production, all the benefits. But it's interesting here because I'm figuring out that it's not clear so far. So I'm going to summarize this information, not completely okay, I just figure out. So this one after subsidy, this is going to be the consumer surplus. They have to pay how much? They have to pay the same quantity, so the consumer surplus is going to be exactly the same. What about the producer surplus? The producer surplus, they will have this one, okay, again this triangle, okay, plus C. Why? Because remember, for each ton sold abroad is going to be given by the government. Okay, so this one is going to be all the exports and is going to be paid this subsidy. Okay, so this old rectangle is a new part of the subsidy. So it's going to be C plus E plus F plus G plus D. Okay, and the government expenses is going to be just C. It's not B and D. It's just C. Okay, this is going to be the government expenses. Okay, this is going to be just C. And so here you have the change for the consumers is going to be anything because they just have to pay again PT. Okay, so it's going to be 0. So the producer surplus, they will receive C. Okay, so this is going to be just C, not A plus B. It's going to be just C, which is going to be received for the export, and the government expenses is going to be C. So the total surplus is going to be exactly the same. Okay, it's going to be exactly the same, just there is not going to be any change because the payment given by the government is going to be provided to the suppliers. Okay, so the total surplus is exactly the same. So I hope it has worked. I hope this analysis, despite of my mess that I put here, it's kind of clear. Consumers, they have the same. Producers, they will receive C, and government, they have to spend C. Okay, I hope it has worked, and have a great success with economics, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.